Welcome to the Ketovangelist Kitchen. I'm Brian.
And I'm Carrie.
And this podcast is dedicated to making things simple and easy for you in the kitchen. Carrie Brown is a classically trained, world-class chef who has a passion for creating ketogenic recipes that taste better than anything you've ever experienced. But more than that, she loves teaching people how to cook the right way.
And each week on this podcast, Brian and I discuss all the ways you can create awesome keto food that is guaranteed to make you a rock star in the kitchen.
If you'd like to learn more about Ketovangelist Kitchen, you can go to KetoVangelistKitchen.com and sign up for the newsletter.
In exchange for your email address, you'll get brand new recipes delivered to your inbox, ready for you to whip up in the kitchen and enjoy with your friends and family.
So sit back, relax, and get ready to laugh and learn. You're about to enter the Ketovangelist Kitchen. And hello again, everybody. I'm Brian. She's Carrie.
Hello.
And this is the Ketovangelist Kitchen. Do you know what the word for today is, Carrie? The word for today is knackered. It's knackered.
Knackered?
Yes.
You know what? That is such a good word. I love that word.
Yeah, that's what we're going with today. What does it mean for people who don't know British?
It means you're absolutely exhausted. Like almost dead exhausted. Right.
So let me explain to you why I'm knackered today. A few weeks back, we had a really severe storm, and there was a tree that was felled by the wind into my front yard, and it is ginormous. And luckily, it didn't hit the house much, but I have to remove it myself. So I spent several hours yesterday, just me and a chainsaw, going to town on it, and it's still there. So there's a lot of work involved. So that's what I have to do the rest of this upcoming weekend, and so the knackeredness will continue. And what about yourself?
I'm not knackered.
No? Okay.
I was a few weeks back.
So then what's the level, what's like one level not quite to knackered, but you're still tired?
I'm just sleepy today.
Was there a British word for that?
A British word for sleepy?
Like, I mean, yeah.
No.
Okay.
No. Other than sleepy.
Oh, okay. So there's so much for filling in the slang with the
Or maybe I'm too sleepy and my brain isn't working terribly well and I can't think of what the slang for sleepy is right now.
Entirely possible.
But knackered, I use knackered a lot. I love that word. Knackered. It just explains things so well.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like it should. There are some words that just sound like they should sound that way. That makes sense.
Yeah, exhausted is fine, but knackered is just so much more descriptive somehow.
Yeah. All right, we've got some administrative stuff to take care of, right? First things first is I want to encourage anyone who's listening to tell the world how awesome Carrie is. You can go to iTunes, leave a rating and review, and we'd appreciate if you would do that because the world needs to know just how awesome Carrie is. And do you have a review to read today, or are we all caught up?
No, we're not. The reviews keep coming.
Oh,
thank you, lovely people.
All right. Well, so what are we reading today then?
The only oh no, I didn't do that one. I'm trying to remember. I'm going to have to keep a list of which ones I've read and which ones I haven't. So I know I did Miel 152 and The Sweet Leek Love, and I know I did Honesty 74, Thank the Lard. I know I did Juju Mums because, bless her, she was fangirling on the Facebook page because we talked about her last week. And I remember that we did SpongeBob without the O. So, but I'm pretty sure we didn't do the review that was titled Entertaining and Informative 5 Stars by, and I'm going to take a stab at the long form of her her handle, whatever her name, screen name, is Brooklyn Girl 1, but she's actually spelling it BKLYN Girl 1, but I think that's Brooklyn. And because I can't make any reasonable noise out of BKLYN Girl, I'm going to go with Brooklyn Girl 1. And she says, I look forward to this podcast every week. Carrie and Brian are fun to listen to and make keto food simple. I have started eating salami because of this podcast. Highly recommended to anyone new to keto or just looking for some inspiration in the kitchen. The Motivational Monday segment is great too.
Well, fantastic. Anytime
right?
anytime
you see, you are changing the world one bite of salami at a time, Mr. Williamson.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I'm changing it one bite at a time, but if, more people who are eating salami, well, no, that works against me because I want it. And if more people are eating it, it's less for me. So I want to encourage everyone to not.
Salami is infinite.
So the infinite of the salami. That's
the pie of salami is not finite.
The set of a salami is infinite. I got you. Okay.
Right. So it's good. The more salami is eaten, the more they will make.
I want to believe that is true. I really do. Okay, so
the Brooklyn Girl, that was lovely.
Yeah, so listening to you explain the name, I had some questions. Like,
okay.
In England, is Y considered a vowel sometimes, like it is in the United States, or is it a consonant?
Yes.
Okay. So
yes.
The other question is, do you have Z or Z in the UK?
We have Z.
What's the deal with Z? Why is it called Z in like every other place that's wrong except for the United States? I don't know why.
Yeah. A to Z. For the first time, I'm just having this really weird moment now because for the first time in my life, A to Z sounded weird. Every time up until this point, I've said A to Z, that sounded weird. And today, A to Z sounds weird. I clearly need to visit my homeland.
Right, to get your Z.
Either that or all my British peeps, you'll need to call me and we need to talk on the phone for a long time.
Just saying Z. Finish everything with Z, so that you get.
Just saying all the good words like knackered and rubbish and bin and stuff like that.
Right. Okay, so that was my question. So Brooklyn Girl, was it Girl GRL or was it Girl GIRL? GIRL.
It was GIRL.
Okay. All right. So Brooklyn Girl's not adverse to vowels. She was just trying to make the name work.
And Brooklyn Girl, please let me know if it's not Brooklyn, if it's like something else entirely.
Right.
Because I'd hate to have you in the wrong place.
Okay. So.
I'm going to read another one.
Oh, there's more. Okay. Let's.
There's actually lots more. So I'm going to read one by someone called Frick, PHRICK.
Uh-oh.
Yes. So I'm not sure if Frick is a boy or a girl, and nothing in the review indicates that. However, Frick says, highlight of my Mondays! ! With 5 stars. And then goes on to say, just an extraordinary podcast. I look forward to it every week. Laughter, education, banter. This podcast has it all for keto cookers. Keep it up, lovely people.
Keto cookers. Is that with a Z?
No.
No? A Z? It's not with a Z?
No Z. No Z involved in that.
All right. I just wanted to make sure. Well, that's like 2 positive ones in a row. I don't know what's going on.
Well, we've actually had like 37 positive ones in a row. And then we had our 2, a lonely 1-star one.
Right. Which everyone, we all need that every once in a while, I guess.
Yes. Keep us grounded.
Right. Okay. So thank you for leaving the reviews and the ratings. If you want to hear your review read aloud on this podcast in Carrie's authentic British accent, then leave us a review and we will get to it and you'll hear her read to you. She's like the keto equivalent to James Earl Jones. Do you know who James Earl Jones is?
No.
Okay. Then all right, what are we talking about today? Since that's going to go nowhere.
Sorry, did I spoiled your thing because I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm quickly beginning to realize that you have no idea what I'm talking about when I talk about anything movie related. So, I'm trying to avoid that.
Well, I have seen a few movies.
Right. Well, The Sound of Music is that doesn't count.
No, actually, I was like 105 before I saw The Sound of Music for the first time. Even people in England were like, "Who are you? You haven't seen The Sound of Music?" I'm like, "No." I mean, I was like really old before I watched that for the first time. So yeah, even The Sound of Music did not escape my overall apathy with movie watching.
Right.
But I've seen Pretty Woman.
Never heard of it. See, two can play at this game.
And there was a brilliant movie set in Alaska that involved a really, 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 really big bear
with Anthony Hopkins
about to eat a human. And I don't remember what the movie was called, but it was like the photography was absolutely mind-blowing. And that was like my favorite movie. That
was with Anthony Hopkins, right?
Yes, that one.
And Alec Baldwin.
Yes.
It's called The Edge. It's called The Edge.
The Edge. That's it. I've seen that. And the photography was the whatever you call the videography.
Cinematography.
Was absolutely amazing.
It's cinematography.
And there's this shot where the camera is basically the human's head and the bear is just going to eat it. And you get this shot of the bear jaws coming over it. And it was just amazing. It was like so real. And I loved that movie. He didn't get eaten, by the way. We're all good. No, nobody got eaten by the bear.
I've never seen it.
But if you like wilderness kind of scenery and big wild spaces and you are a fan of really good film making, go rent a copy or stream or whatever you people do these days to watch a movie.
I think the term you're looking for is cinematography.
Whatever the marvelousness that movie was. If you really enjoy that, then get a copy of The Edge. Brilliant movie.
All right, there you go. That's a rousing endorsement from one Carrie Brown about one particular movie. All right.
And really short but scary story that when I was living in England, I met I had a lot of American friends, and I met one particular friend who was very important to me because he was fundamental in. This is going to sound dramatic, and actually it was. He kind of saved my life. And so this was years ago. And then he finished up his time in America and he came back, but we kept in touch, and he got married and we kept in touch and had children and we kept in touch. And so one time I flew over, and I think this was the first time that I flew over and I went to see him and to meet his family. And it was brilliant. It was like one of those people where like, we hadn't seen each other for 5 years, but the moment we met at the airport, it was like we'd seen each other yesterday. It was kind of just that really deep friendship where it never goes away. And so I go to, and they live in Arizona. So I flew from England to Arizona, and we went out to get a movie, which was still a thing then. You went out to rent a movie, and we went out and got food and a movie. And I was standing, his name's Sean, and I was standing in the video store looking at movies. And he said, what do you want to see? And I was just like, this is a movie star. I have no idea. And he reached out and said, this is my favorite movie, and picked up The Edge. And I was just like, wow, really? Because to have the same favorite movie as me out of all the millions of movies there are, and this is someone, we lived on different continents, and we've never had, we don't have a lot of contact. So it was just one of those kind of serendipitous moments.
Yes, that sounds like there's a lot of dip involved.
To do with The Edge.
Right. Well, there you go. So if you haven't seen The Edge and you like watching people get eaten by bears,
but nobody got eaten.
I'm trying to sell the movie. Okay, you're not helping. You gotta. This is how things are done. You gotta make it salacious so that people want to go see it. That's just the way it's done. That's how marketing is accomplished nowadays. All right, so we're done talking about.
I don't know how we got there.
I think it was because of Anthony Hopkins. I mean, honestly, I think, didn't the plane crash? That's how we got there. That's how they.
No. Yes, that is how he got there. I'm not sure how we got to The Edge.
Well, I mean, one crash is as good as another. So the subject matter of today's podcast is what?
It's recipes.
Recipes. Okay, you're going to have to be more specific than that, because that's pretty general. That's pretty vague.
Yes, and it's more so on the Facebook group and other various places. I've seen, not lately, but I've seen it be said that either do I need to, learn how to make almond flour biscuits in order to be keto, or, do I have to use recipes? And other people who have said various forms of, I reached my goal weight and I didn't use a single recipe, like recipes were somehow bad. And so that's what kind of sparked me into thinking that maybe it will be helpful for people, particularly people who are new to keto, people who are new to cooking, people who have never really felt the need or had to start thinking about recipes before, because either they didn't cook or they ate just fast food or, whatever. So I thought it might be useful just to kind of talk a little bit about recipes in general. Why not? Why they're good? Why you need them? Why you don't need them? Where to get the best ones? All of that kind of stuff.
I have a feeling that I know the answer to that last question. Or I have a feeling I know where we can find the best ones. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say I have a sinking suspicion that I know.
Well, except that you know how I feel about anything being termed the best.
No, I don't. Are you for it or against it?
I'm absolutely against it.
Well, that's too bad. That's just
because unless you've eaten every single chocolate brownie on earth, you have no right to say this one was the best or is the best. You could say it's the best one I've ever eaten, but you can't say it's the best. So when you go on Pinterest or Facebook or wherever people market their blog recipes, if the title says the best whatever, I'm like, eh.
Okay, so we can't tell people where we think the best recipes are then, is what you're saying.
Right.
All right, then I have to rewrite some notes. Because I think I know where the best ones is.
Right.
Okay, so where do we start? Where do we tackle this thing from?
So, do you need them?
Me? No.
Right.
So,
and I think there are a subgroup of people who will never use a recipe in their life. Does that mean that they're somehow better or worse than the rest of us who do? Absolutely not. It's just you can be keto, stay keto. If cooking really isn't your thing, then possibly you're not listening to this podcast, but maybe.
Well, if you're not listening to this podcast right now, then we're not talking to you.
So it is perfectly possible to stay perfectly keto for the rest of your life without looking at a single recipe, without following a single recipe, without doing anything with a recipe.
Right.
You can totally do that. So I think the nut of this podcast is that it's all good. Using recipes is good. Not using recipes is good. You can all still get to your goal either way. But I want to be clear that everybody's okay. There's no better or worse way to do it.
Yeah. So if the idea is you somehow have accomplished something by never cracking open a recipe book, I don't know that necessarily that's true. So the point is, if you're getting to where your goal is and you are or are not using recipes, it doesn't matter. What matters is you're getting towards your goal, right? I mean, that's
exactly. And I think we touched on this in one of our ranty podcasts. We touched on the whole, I reached my goal without eating a single keto treat. And I'm like, so?
All right. So that kind of lays the groundwork for what we're going to be, like the reasoning for what we're talking about. But what specifically do we want to talk about that is recipe centric? What makes a good recipe? What makes a bad recipe? What are the reasons you would or wouldn't want to use them?
Right.
Where do we start with any of that?
I kind of, when I wrote the notes for this, and I actually did write notes for this, which is a bit of a first, almost a first. Mm-hmm. And I've just got a bunch of statements typed down. It didn't really kind of have a path or a pattern to it. The first thing I want, we've already established is that you can be perfectly keto for the rest of your life by never using a recipe. You can also be perfectly keto for the rest of your life using recipes for every time you go in the kitchen. If you use a recipe, it's all good. The important thing is that you get to your goal. How you get there really is of no consequence. It doesn't matter. And there's no, the celebration is for you getting there. I think one of the things I'm trying to make sure people understand is that if you love to cook, then have at it. I love to cook for other people. I don't care about cooking for me. But if you love to cook and you love to experiment and you love to spend 3 hours using some wildly complicated recipe to make a keto birthday cake, and that floats your boat and everybody loves it, then that's awesome. Have at it. But if that's not your thing, nobody's failing one way or the other, is my point. Everybody's winning. If you love to cook, don't ever feel like, or, because you love to eat, don't ever feel like you're wasting your time, or you shouldn't be spending that amount of time creating food. If you love it, do it. If you want to learn and get better at it, spend time doing it. If you want to become super proficient, that's awesome. But if that's not your thing, if you literally just see food as fuel and you don't get pleasure out of the creating or the doing or a huge amount of pleasure out of the tasting, eating part, then that's fine too. Grill steak, eat some stir-fried green beans and call it good. Either way, you're going to reach your goal and you're going to be happier for it. So,
all right. So then when would be a time? So let's go with this. What's a good time to use recipes? What's a good time to just skip them or not worry about them?
I think for my rule my rule of thumb would be, if it's baking, if it involves, so not an entree, if it's baking, if it's the treats, if it's more the what would fall into the baking, desserts, that kind of category, you are going to be a lot more successful if you use a recipe, because, as I've said multiple times, baking is science, and it's not just a case of tossing a bunch of things you like in a bowl and hoping you get a good result. You actually, there's, scientific ratios of sweetener versus fats versus liquids that work and ones that don't to get you the result you want. So if it's in the baking department, I would say, or if it's using any of those kind of ingredients, you will get a much better result if you use a recipe. It's much easier to wing your what
entree.
Some people may term breakfast. So the things that most of us grew up eating at breakfast time or at dinner time, entrees, it's much easier to wing those. Although the more complicated they are, then obviously a recipe is going to be beneficial. For new people cooking, a recipe might be essential all the time, every time for the rest of your life, because some people are just wired that way, that they just want to be successful every single time. They weren't born with the creative, food creative gene. They just want to be given, okay, if you put this with this with this in this order, in this manner, you're going to get a delicious result. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing.
For me, I think the reason that someone would want to use a recipe is all about consistency. For me, like, if you find something you like and you want it to be the same exact way every single time that you make it, that would be a perfect example of why you would want to use a recipe.
Absolutely.
The other one, there's another one though, and this is way more esoteric, and that is, someone actually told me one time, and I can't disagree with them, but they told me one time that recipes is a way for you to stay connected with your previous generations. So you take a recipe that your great grandmother or grandfather made, and you can make the exact same thing. So you can kind of share that experience with, generations past, which, for some people that's like a cool thing. So, I mean, I can see that as a valid reason for to me, that's a reason that you would want to have a recipe, for that kind of connection and that consistency.
That is awesome. I was just thinking in terms of technical, because it's what I do in terms of developing recipes. I had entirely forgotten, and probably because I live in this little bubble with a bunch of cats, that that's not something I experience in my life, hardly at all. But I can absolutely see, and now you think about it, particularly in America, there's a lot of, this was my grandma's recipe, and there's a lot of emotional, well-being and comfort wrapped up in, every time I saw grandma, she used to make this, and that, floods me with lovely memories and feelings about grandma. So yes, that's brilliant. Thank you for saying that.
What? Okay, so what would be so let's go to the counterpoint to that. What would be an example of when you wouldn't really care about using a recipe, or you wouldn't want to use a recipe?
I loved your point. Also, I loved your point about the whole getting a consistent result. And I, for one, there was a moment on Facebook the other day where somebody asked me something about one of the recipes in the new keto cookbook, and I had to go look it up, and it was just like, no, seriously, I don't remember word for word at 40 recipes off the top of my head. I just don't. So I still, in case you're all wondering, if I remake anything from any of my cookbooks, I go get the cookbook and I open it up and I follow the recipe, because I just don't remember. But I remember somewhat. But if I, as Brian says, if I want it to come out exactly the same way as it did when I created it, and I want it to be consistent, then I'm going to open up the book and I'm going to follow the recipe and follow the directions exactly the same, because I want it to be exactly the same. Where you wouldn't, with simple things like if you're making a salad, for example, for the most part, you could put in all of the things, a bunch of the lettuces you love with a bunch of the other salad ingredients you love, and toss it together. Grill a chicken breast, skin on, of course, or a chicken thigh, even better, skin on, and call it good. You don't need a recipe for that. There's the things where you really need a recipe to be successful is where it's not just a, fresh cooked food, where there's maybe entrees where there's a sauce involved. You have to get the ratios of liquid to thickener right if you're going to have the sauce that you want, if you're going to have that right and work. Baked goods, as we talked about, if you want that to come out right, you really need a recipe. And also, I think there's there's absolutely nothing wrong with this either, but I think if some people care a lot more, their palates are a lot more experienced, if you will. That's their thing. Their palates are more sensitive. They're super tasters. There's just something that intrigues them, and they're looking for more complex flavors, and they're looking for more complicated dishes. And so there's those people, and there's other people who are like, well, yeah, it tasted fine. So those people don't need to be so exact or so specific. If their bar for delicious is lower, and that there's absolutely no criticism or detriment involved in that. We're just different people. And you can apply that same thing to anything in life. It's just, people who, like for me, a car gets me from A to B. The intricacies of what makes one car better than the other are kind of lost on me. It's the same thing with food. Some people are like me. My bar for delicious is super high. One, because I was genetically born a super taster, and that's a thing, so I can tell minute differences. I also have a super sensor for bitter. So part of me was born that way, but part of me just had this inherent interest in food. And so I've eaten a huge amount in terms of different varieties of food, which over the years, and I've been exposed either because I've just been in the right place at the right time, or I've sought out what people celebrate as being really, really good food, and I've eaten a lot of it. So my bar for delicious is a lot higher than other people's. If your bar just isn't that high, or food is just a fuel to you, then you can be more what's the word, blasé about it, and not worry about, if I'd have done it different, could it have tasted better, if that's not something that really bugs you.
Yeah, for me, I don't use recipes most of the time, and it's not because I have any kind of it's not like I don't care about or I don't like recipes. It's that I'm much more interested in being creative on my own. Like I'll look at something and I'll like, yeah, I'm going to substitute those 5 ingredients because either I don't know what they taste like and I don't care, or I do know what they taste like and I don't like it. And so for me, if you're just trying to, express, like you were saying, because you're trying to kind of like crank the knob up on the tasting, you can, or you want to experience a little bit more creativity on your own part, then don't worry so much about some of the best foods that I've created have been when I just grabbed some stuff and saw what I could make out of it. Like I didn't care necessarily how it was going to turn out, but it turned out really, really good.
Right.
And that can be a lot of fun. Now, if you're not someone who is keen for that sort of stuff, then you definitely don't want to just go, winging it. But if you've got some experience, this is going to sound weird, but you trust your taste buds, right? Or you trust your ability to put together a flavor profile. If you trust that, then it's going to be a whole lot easier for you. But you also got to be honest. When something is horrible, you got to be willing to admit to yourself that it's horrible and start all over. But so you wouldn't necessarily want a recipe when you're just trying to be creative about stuff, right?
Right. Although you may use one as a starting point, like as you just said,
Right.
you may get a base recipe and then go, yeah, but that flavor doesn't do it for me, so I'm going to substitute it with this herb for that herb and see what happens.
I will say this: I'm making this announcement public. I have never made the same recipe twice. Let me rephrase that. I've never made the same recipe twice, the actual recipe. I've made something out of a recipe book before, and then the second go around, I just either did it by my own measurements, or I substitute stuff, or I just winged it, right? The only time I've ever made the same exact recipe based upon what was in the recipe by itself, made the same exact meal based upon what was in the recipe, was the stuffing that was in your holiday cookbook. That's the only time that I've ever done that. It was the pork stuffing. You know what I'm talking about?
The creamy sausage stuffing.
No idea what it's called. But it tasted just like stovetop stuffing, that's what I grew up eating in terms. So
Yay!
So that was the only time I've ever done that. Most of the time I'll just get creative because that's just how my brain works anyway. I'm so contrarian. I'm going to do it my way. I don't care. So,
right. And I think why I'm umming and ahhing a lot is because I spend 99% of my life creating new things. So this isn't something that I have to think about for myself. I don't have to think about, finding recipes or do that but then that's what I do. I mean, I develop recipes. So I'm coming at this from a bit of an odd angle. So I'm trying to put on my, if I were a normal person hat, if I was just a person that needed to feed themselves and their family, I'm trying to approach it from standing in other people's shoes rather than the crazy life that I have where everything I do is an experiment.
Yes.
However, of course, when I do that, I am very particular and I'm very exact because I then share them with you. So I do all the experimentation and I do all the mistake making to get to the place where what I then deliver to you as a recipe will give you a fantastically tasting working recipe so that you can look like a rock star, or not so that you can look like one, so you can be a rock star in the kitchen because I've done all the thinking and the experimenting and the yelling and the tea towel throwing for you.
Yes, all of the experimenting and the yelling. You want to do that. You want to make sure that's taken care
of. So now I'm talking to the people who are not like Brian, and I think this is actually the vast majority of people just
I should hope so. I should hope so.
With regard to cooking, I'm talking specifically, who want some direction. And that's where recipes are brilliant. And the other time, so I think that's most people, but also there were a few people on Facebook this week particularly who kind of posted in the group, okay, I normally cook simple stuff and I'm doing great and I'm reaching my goals, but I'm kind of getting bored. Somebody give me some recipes. And I think that's probably one of the best reasons why you would want to start dabbling, why recipes are awesome, is that they give you new ideas. They give you, you may still be eating chicken every night, but you can eat chicken every night and it feels like a whole new thing because you've put it together with different ingredients. And a lot of people don't have the time or the inclination to come up with those different things themselves. So being able to get a recipe that, gives you those flavor combinations that work, to give you that ready-made is the best thing, because when you do get bored, you don't have to become a master chef to figure all that out. A recipe is really just a shortcut to how to get something delicious and different and something that you may not have come up with into your hands. So boredom is probably one of the biggest reasons why recipes are awesome, because it can inspire you and inspire your family, keep the troops happy with new things that you haven't tried before, or just different ways of eating the same food, different ways of eating your ground beef, different ways of eating that chicken. That's, for me, I think is one of the big things why recipes are awesome.
Yeah, and I think
it cuts out the boredom.
Well, and two things pop into my head. One is the comparison to learning how to play music. Like if you're learning how to play an instrument, you can master certain fundamental aspects of it, but then you're like, okay, well, how do I do a song? And then you basically go and you grab some sheet music or some tabs or whatever, and you learn the song. It's the same thing as a recipe. So once you get it down, you no longer need to look at the sheet music anymore. You can play it, and then you've added some chops to your techniques, right? So that you have that later on for future stuff. Same with recipes, right? Like if you've attained a certain level, grabbing some more, will teach you different flavor profiles and different ways of doing things, this, that, or the other. The other thing is that I totally overlooked that you brought up was recipes are a great way to learn, right? Like if you have no idea how to cook at all, recipes are really the best way for a lot of people to learn, especially like you said, if they're not of the same kind of mentality that I am, where I learned by just going in and grabbing stuff and seeing what tasted good to me. I didn't really care about any of the other stuff. So if you're not sure, for example, let's say let's say even someone who's not an absolute beginner, because that's kind of addressed to someone who is an absolute beginner. That's just a way to learn to cook. But someone who isn't, but you want to learn how to cook, say, Thai food, or you want to learn how to cook, say, Indian food, or some other sort of Mexican food or ethnic food of some kind that you don't have a lot of experience with, you grab recipes and you look and see what the ingredients are common, and you start to understand some themes, and you start to understand how things are put together, and you really start to understand, what's involved. So it's through that you sort of expand your culinary repertoire, as it were. So yeah, those are a couple of other things to tack on. Now the question now becomes then, what makes a good recipe and what makes a bad recipe? So you have to pick.
Well, no, first I have to take you to task over something you said a little while back.
Oh, what is that?
Well, you said you were talking about how you might look at a recipe and change it up because you don't like something and put something else in, which is fine, and I get that, but I have found that a lot of people, and this isn't me making this up, I have a lot of feedback and email from people who said, for example, I always hated Brussels sprouts, but your bacon and Brussels sprouts chowder, I now eat Brussels sprouts every day. I'm a huge fan. Or, and I think this applies particularly to vegetables, which is why it doesn't enter your head, because you just think vegetables suck. But I think a lot in the vegetable department, there's a lot of people who think they don't like vegetables, either because there's a lot of vegetables they've never tried because they were never given to them when they were growing up, so they're new and they haven't tried them, or people have grown up with vegetables that were not cooked well or were not cooked in an exciting way. And so, or actually, because not everybody's a great cook. And so maybe you grew up in a house where cooking really wasn't a thing, or you weren't exposed to it much, or that wasn't a skill either. Or if you only had one parent, that your parent wasn't good at, then you may have a lot of preconceived notions about things that you don't like. Whereas actually, if you eat them cooked brilliantly, or you eat them cooked in a different way, you might find that it wasn't the thing that you didn't like, it was just the way it was cooked that you didn't like. I have a lot of people that have been converted to Brussels sprouts, that have been converted to leeks, that have now love vegetables, whereas they didn't used to, because of the way they'd been brought up with either badly cooked vegetables or vegetables that they didn't eat. So I just wanted to take you to task, because if you don't assume that because you didn't like something when you were 12 and your mother cooked it badly, that you don't like the thing. There's a good chance, in my experience from interactions with other people, that you could discover that you actually love things that you thought you hated. I had, when I first started blogging recipes, a couple friends of mine, husband and wife, used to come over we did something called the Friday night dinner, and they would come over Friday night.
What night of the week was it?
Friday.
Oh, okay. All right, just checking.
The Friday night dinner.
Right, okay. That makes sense then.
So they'd come over on a Friday night, and I would cook, an entree plus one or two sides, and sometimes there was a dessert, depending on what the recipes were. And then those were the recipes that I photographed and put on the blog the following week. So this was how I generated, because I find it much more enjoyable when I cook for other people. If I'm cooking for me, I'm like, bleh. But if I have someone to cook for, that makes me super happy. And of course, I had built-in taste testers. So they would come over on Friday, and I didn't know these people very well. We were newly acquainted, but they were up for the adventure, and I didn't know anything about their tastes, what they did or didn't like, and I didn't ask them. And the rule was, you don't have to like it, but you do have to try it. And so they were game, and they came over, and every week. And I remember that there were so many weeks where they would come in, and either Becky or Justin would kind of look at me, or Becky would whisper, "Justin hates cabbage." And because there'd be a big plate of cabbagey something or other, and Justin would kind of look, or Justin would look at Becky and go, "Really?" And the rule, you must try it, you don't have to like it. And there was not one, and I served up all the things that I found out afterwards they hated. They ate and loved the way that I'd cooked them, or the sauce that I'd put them in, or what I'd paired them with. So I just have to take you to task on, if you think you don't like it, I just, give it another try. If you get a good recipe, give it another try, because you might find that you love it.
And you might find that it's terrible. So
you also may find that you still don't love it. But my experience has been overwhelmingly that the opposite, that given a good recipe, a successful recipe, things can taste absolutely delicious that you thought previously were nasty. Because there's a big difference between a bad recipe and a good recipe. And if you've only been exposed to bad ones in the past, when you get a good one, you might find that it wasn't the food at all. It was just the way it was put together.
Well, that's a great segue. So what makes a good recipe and what makes a bad recipe then?
What makes a good recipe? One that works.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
And one that tastes good. Well, for example, a sauce, if it looks like a sauce and it's smooth and it's glossy and, all the characteristics of a sauce, then that's a successful recipe. Well, it's a technically successful recipe, but it also has to taste delicious. So one, it has to work in terms of ending up, if it's curdled, something's gone wrong. If it's lumpy, something's gone wrong. So it has to be technically successful. If it's a baked good, then it probably has to rise. If it's a souffle, it has to be fat, not flat. So there's technical success in recipe. And then there's also the fact that it has to taste good.
All right.
And there's an alarming number of recipes in cookbooks and on the internet where the recipes simply don't work and or don't taste good. And again, that's not just me being me, because I don't make most of them. In fact, I don't make any of them. This is feedback I get on a daily basis from you lovely people out there. And I see posted on Facebook, I tried this and it was awful, or I tried this and it didn't work. What did I do wrong? And so on and so forth. Most of the time, my guess would be that it was the recipe, not you.
Right. So you're saying that if people could be really good cooks, they just don't. They're using the wrong stuff, or they're using the wrong sorts of instruments, and it's not really going to work out for them.
Either the wrong sorts of instruments, or just a not well put together recipe.
That's what I'm saying. When I say instruments, that's what I'm talking about. The recipes, and so if the recipe sucks, it doesn't matter how good of a cook you are. I guess is what you're saying, right?
Right. There are a lot of recipes, and there's some things. Every once in a while, I'll get a wild hair, and I'll see something that has got like 5 trillion likes on some form of social media, and I'll go, I'm just going to make it and see. And it's been such a disappointing experience, because so many times the recipe just doesn't work technically from a technical standpoint. There are a lot of recipes out there that I know won't work just by looking at the ingredients. So, and one of the best examples would be, the use of sweeteners, because stevia, erythritol, and xylitol, while they all get a similar result in terms of sweetening, they don't behave the same way in terms of other properties. And so I can look at, for example, if you replace stevia, the drops or the powder, like, you need 3 drops to get the same sweetness as 4 ounces of granulated sweetener, that's great. But if it's something that requires the bulk and the volume of the granular sweetener, you're not going to get the same result. You can't just switch out sweeteners and expect to get the same result. You might get the same result in terms of taste, but you won't in terms of structure.
All right.
So there's recipes. I read a lot of recipes online that I just know aren't going to work.
So it's not necessarily you can just tell by looking. I mean, generally a listener necessarily wouldn't be able to just tell by looking at it.
Right.
After they've had some experience, they may be able to, but you basically have to make
right.
a recipe, You have to make a recipe, decide whether it sucks, and then that's how you decide whether or not it's a good recipe, right? It's not like you can tell beforehand.
Right.
Okay.
And that is where I come in, because I am, and the reason I do what I do is because I want everybody to be successful. I want you to be successful at living a keto lifestyle. I want you to be successful in clearing up all your health issues. I want you to be successful in reaching your weight goals. And I know that most people, if they were required to just eat, you know, unlike Brian, if they were just told, well, you can only eat salami and cheese, or you can only eat, you know, grilled steak and salad, then a lot of people simply wouldn't stick to that. They would fail, because the majority of people need more variety than that, or, you know, so, but if you're going to go into the world of recipes, you need a good one. And my role in all of this is my core tenets. The reason I do it is because I want you to succeed in the kitchen. I want you to be a rock star. I want you to be able to craft absolutely delicious meals for yourself and your family that will also keep you perfectly on your keto track. I'm only going to give you recipes that work. I'm only going to give you recipes that are delicious, because maybe this is just me being weird, but it bothers me that so many people waste so many ingredients and expensive ingredients on recipes they find on Pinterest that don't work. It literally makes me sad when I get emails and see all the stories on Facebook about people, well, I had to throw it all away because it didn't work. I had to throw it all away because it didn't taste good. So why I do what I do is I want to save you a bunch of time. I don't want you to spend your lives trawling the internet or trawling Pinterest and, you know, trying to figure out which is a good recipe and which isn't a good recipe, which you can't really do until you've made it. I want to avoid you wasting a lot of time making something that fails. I want to avoid you spending a lot of money on ingredients that you then can't eat because they've failed. So that's why, you know, if Brian and I say, you know, use our cookbooks, use the recipes on Ketovangelist Kitchen, or I still have some over on my site, carriebrown.com, it's because it's not because of any kind of egotistical thing, right? It's because I'm trying to give you recipes that will make you shine and will get your family fed in the most least time-consuming, economical way. That means you don't have to spend days of your life trawling on Pinterest. You don't have to get to the end of every day and go, what am I going to feed my family? You don't have to waste money on expensive ingredients. You don't have to do any of that. I want you to be successfully creating fast, delicious recipes for you and your family, where nobody feels like they're deprived in any way. I want your eating life to be more delicious than it was before you went keto. And that is my only motivation for doing what I do in the Ketovangelist Kitchen, is to help you be successful in your keto life.
Right. So big takeaway there is you should use Carrie's recipes, because Carrie's recipes are the best. That's the big takeaway. All right, so
that's Brian's takeaway.
Yeah, maybe Brian's right, is all I'm saying. So then
I just wanted people to understand what drives me to do this. And, you know, and there's a few people, not very many. Most of you are so entirely grateful for the books that I produce and for the recipes we post for free up on the website. But there are a few people who are just like, go to Pinterest. The recipes are free. Yes, they are. However, do they work? Do they taste good? Are you going to waste a bunch of money on ingredients? Are you going to waste a bunch of time searching? So yes, recipes are Pinterest on free. There's no guarantee they're going to work. There's no guarantee you're not going to waste an inordinate amount of time and money getting to that result. There's absolutely no guarantee they're going to taste good. And that's what I'm trying to help you avoid, all of those pitfalls. And I also, the biggest pitfall I want to help you avoid is the it didn't work, so I'm a lousy cook pitfall. I absolutely believe that given a great recipe and some great ingredients and a little bit of simple instruction, every one of you can be an awesome rock star keto cooker. I absolutely believe that. And that's why I do what I do, because I know that a lot of you think you can't cook when that problem is not you at all.
Right. The problem is everyone else.
Well, not everyone else, but
okay.
The problem is bad recipe.
Oh, that's where I was going to go with that. Okay.
Lack of, instructions that don't make sense, or instructions that are written poorly so you can't make sense of them, or just instructions with half of them missing, or, all of those things. I think it's a human tendency to think it didn't work. I must be a horrible cook. And I don't think that that's the case the majority of the time.
I think that's an interesting response, because I would never ever have that response, like, ever. If I made something and it was terrible, I would never think I'm a horrible cook, because I know I'm an awesome cook. Like, if I grab some salami out of the fridge and I grab some cheese out of the fridge and I put them both in a bowl, and for some reason they don't taste good, I would never think I'm a horrible cook. I would just think, hey, that salami probably expired 2 months ago. I should not have eaten it. That's probably what I would think.
Well, let's be realistic here, Brian. You ain't going to have salami in your fridge for 2 months.
No, it's true. It's true. Now, it's possible. However, I do buy a lot of it, and it's possible that a package of salami gets, like, pushed to the back and I forget about it, like, or I don't see it for a period of time. That's entirely possible. And that has happened on occasion. Now, not for 2 months at this point, but I'm not saying it won't. Okay, so that's basically
anyway. But I think we've ascertained earlier in the podcast that not a lot of people are like you.
No, thankfully, and I think the world is like, woof. That's good.
And I know just from that, people look at the internet and go, "Oh, it's on the internet; it must be true." Or, they have a blog, so they know what they're doing. Or they have a blog, so they're an expert. And when it comes to food and recipes, that's absolutely not necessarily true.
Well, it's not just food and recipes, but yeah, especially food and
right.
recipes. Okay, so that's a good, like, segue now, because you know what time it is now. It's time to motivate some people. So what's our Motivation Monday for today?
I've just spent an hour motivating you all.
Oh, well, then you forgot to tell me, because I didn't do the intro for the motivation part. So,
was the entire podcast not a motivation?
I don't know. People will have to tell us whether or not the entire thing was motivating up to this point. But now it's specifically the Motivation Monday type, or time. Not type. So what's our Motivation Monday for today?
What we'd like you to think about this week is, don't confuse your path with your destination. Just because it's stormy now doesn't mean you aren't headed for sunshine.
Okay. So do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
No, I think you should go first.
So someone asked Abraham Lincoln. Do you know who Abraham Lincoln is?
I do.
Okay, just making sure. Because he wasn't British. Someone asked Abraham Lincoln one time about what he would say when he was confronted with a very difficult situation, and what he would say if he was confronted with a very beneficial situation, whatever the situation may be. And his response to both of them was the same thing. This too shall pass. So essentially what he was getting at is you shouldn't be too caught up in the moment no matter what's going on, because time will go by and things will change, and you have to be able to prepare for that. So if you're in a particularly bad situation or a difficult situation, or you're having a rough time for whatever reason, it's going to be, it's not going to stay that way. It never stays that way. It's always going to change. So what you have is the option of deciding which way you want it to change. And everyone has bad days. Everyone has bad weeks. Everyone has bad situations. No one is 100% all the time, never going through difficulties. So my take on what you read is, it's not about where you are right now. It's about, because where you are right now may be bad, but remember, all you've got to do is just keep moving along, keep trudging along. If you're not making progress as fast as you want, that's okay. Just keep trusting the process, keep enjoying yourself, and you'll get there, right? One of the things that is important is that you just stay the course. Stay the course. Don't let the fact that you've had a bad day throw you off of everything. That's my take. What's yours?
This is actually, and this wasn't planned, but this actually, the last little while, my day job has been stormy, would be a good way to, there'd be one word I could choose to describe it. And last week it kind of got to the point where I had lost hold of the notion that my path and my destination were different, because the path I was currently on back then was really, and I could see no end in sight. So actually when this popped up on my computer today, it seemed like the perfect thing, because I've actually just been doing that myself. And it actually took the lovely Mr. Williamson to ask me that question yesterday was, it's bad now, but is it going to be bad like that forever, or is this just a thing? And that was just reminded me that, sometimes you drive through some weather. I've never had a time where the weather hasn't ended and the sunshine has come out. That's never been the case. So when this popped up today, that was kind of synchronicity at its finest, because I've actually just been going through that, and it did. And sometimes it takes, important people in your life to remind you that it's stormy now, but it's not always going to be like that, and you just have to weather the storm, and it will be okay. And I think particularly applying it to keto, we have the infamous stall, or we have periods where we don't seem to be making progress anymore. But I've learned that you just have to keep on going. You just have to, make your mind up, keep on going. The storm will pass.
All right. So there you go. That's your thought for this week. Take a look at where you are. And if you're not happy, just remember, it's not going to stay that way. And you actually have to give up control in order to make it go a place you don't want it to go, right? Like, you can actually guide this ship a little bit. So think about that this week. All right. So there's your motivation for the week. Read it one more time before we close it out.
Don't confuse your path with your destination. Just because it's stormy now doesn't mean you aren't headed for sunshine.
There you go. Sunshine away. All right. Okay, so that's just about it, right? That's the whole thing. What's the big takeaway? What's the final word on what we're talking about today?
Embrace recipes. Good recipes are awesome and will help you to be a rock star in the kitchen.
All right, there you go. You want to expand your horizons or learn a little bit? Recipes are a good way. All right, so Carrie, I guess I'll talk to you next week.
Yes, you will.
Okie dokie. All right, that's another trip to the kitchen, all finitoed. Recipes are important if you're trying to learn how to do some stuff. If you really don't know and you really want to be better at it, good way to do it is recipes. Plus, it'll allow you to expand your creativity a little bit too, so give it a shot. Now, I'm going to be a little biased, and I'm going to tell you that Carrie's recipes are the bestest. So you can go to the website, KETOVangelistKitchen.com, and buy your books. It's the bestest, so there you go. All right, you can connect with us all over social medias. Keto Van Kitchen on Twitter, Keto Evangelist Kitchen on Instagram, Facebook group of Keto Evangelist Kitchen. Until next time, kiddos, keep being awesome. Powered by ketones.